Hey everyone, we are officially live for another episode of our pre-symposium panel as we ramp up for our executive symposium next week, April 25th in Houston, Texas, talking about how to effectively succession plan and promote from within. So in our pre-symposium panels, we bring leaders and attendees of our executive symposium together to discuss the topic itself and discuss what our thoughts are on how to effectively succession plan and promote from within. So I'd love to have my three panelists for today introduce themselves and a little bit about what they do. Laura, do you mind going first?
Sure. Thanks, Garrett. Hi, this is Laura Kelley. I'm with Crown Castle. I am a director of talent here at Crown. I've been here a little over 6 years. My responsibilities are everything from talent acquisition, university relations, talent planning, talent mobility, and succession and potential planning.
Amazing. Kevin, how about yourself?
Kevin Baker, recently started a consulting firm of my own focused on sales consulting and strategy and execution. Been in the business world for over 30 years, both large companies, doing planning really as part of running large global teams. But welcome and thanks for the invite.
Of course, of course. And Lily, how about yourself?
Hi, Garrett. Lily Bain. I'm the Vice President of Health Help. We are a third-party vendor for health insurance companies. So I oversee the client services department. So essentially, I'm overseeing all of our accounts and ensuring, really managing the life cycle from beginning to end and ensuring overall client satisfaction and that we're meeting our goals and our KPIs.
Amazing. Very cool. And I'm Garrett Mintz. I'm the founder of Ambition in Motion. At Ambition in Motion, our vision is a world where the vast majority of people are excited to go to work. When they are there, their expectations meet reality. And when they come home, they feel fulfilled. And we believe that starts with leaders because leaders create the experiences employees have while at work. And so we create technologies and communities to empower leaders to be their best selves for their teams. And one of the ways that we build community is through our executive symposiums. So let's dive into the topic, how to effectively succession plan and promote from within. So I'd love to ask each of you, succession planning, promoting from within, I think oftentimes the human element of succession planning, whether we're going through a merger or acquisition, maybe we've got some people retiring, maybe some people were laid off, or maybe there was a surprise, someone had decided to leave and go to another organization. I think so often from an executive perspective, it's really easy to overlook that. I think we just think like, oh, we'll just plug this person in and they're just going to take it and run with it and they'll just figure it out. I think the human side of what happens next is very oftentimes overlooked. I guess what I'd be curious to learn is what have you found to be effective in terms of properly planning for what happens next when a change needs to be made, whether that means you've gone through a merger acquisition or a reorg's going on, or a layoff had happened, or someone left on their own, or someone retired. How do you go about properly preparing for that next step, even if it was a surprise? Who wants to go first?
I'll take a shot at it. I've seen succession planning done really well, and that's kind of your question here. I've seen it done poorly, and I've been part of those organizations and in the leadership side of that planning effort. When I've seen it done well, it doesn't necessarily have to be a large corporation, but it isn't event driven. It isn't because of a layoff or mergers and acquisition. It's part of the DNA of the company in terms of identifying future talent to grow, more of a succession planning, ensuring those that are interested and really understanding through your full team, there's people that may not want to become something that you're planning on them or you're thinking. So the way I've done it well was part of kind of a biannual calibration with leadership development training tied to it, essentially stack ranking each employee throughout the corporation. Even, I know it's for key roles or for leadership, it can go all the way down really through your manager. So at an exec director level, I've had managers and the team leads start and kind of understand their team. It ensures, I believe, that people are having those career conversations, which are important, that rarely happen or are a checkbox. It's helpful that it's documented in a system. It's also helpful that there's a structured process where you get together with other leaders and maybe present your team or your key talent that your executives then hear and they go up the next level. So I've seen it done where it's kind of like, hey, I put you down for the senior vice president of sales. You're kind of one of three people. Oh, great. What does that mean? What is the training behind it? Where do we go from here? And I'm sure Laura, being at the point of that, or Lily, I'm curious to hear what you guys have seen do well.
I couldn't agree with you more, Kevin, on a lot of what you just said. It's not just an event. It's not a one and done. And I think companies have to, really outline what are our goals? What are we looking to accomplish? What are the outcomes that we're looking to drive with this process? And what are the benefits and the sustainability of the program? To your point, Kevin, I've been with small companies, large companies. I've had customers that were large and small, and it has to be thread through the DNA of that organization. And very structured, but high engagement and high communication is always needed. But again, going back to what are our goals? What are we trying to accomplish?
Yeah. I agree with that, Laura. So for me, it's something, and Garrett, I think you've heard me say before that I'm always training my successor. But I think it really starts at the beginning. Number one, identifying those organizational goals, and then also those departmental goals. So as as I am hiring, I'm hiring people with that thought in mind, and really hiring future leaders, as Kevin had said. But it's part of my plan. I am meeting with my team individually on a weekly basis and identifying how do they see their career path. If they don't see their career path in my specific department or within the organization, that's one thing. But if they do, then I really want to ensure that every single day it's a matter of growing those skills within them, and empowering them. I think it's something that has to be nurtured. I think it's something that's not done in a bottle or siloed. It has to be done in combination with our leadership team. But I agree with everything that both you, what you and Kevin said.
It's not forgetting to ask those leaders, what are their aspirations?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if it were all this easy, then everyone would be doing it, right? So I think the question I have here is how, as an executive team, can we put incentives in place so then we regularly have these conversations? Because what I often see is, oh yeah, like theoretically, like in a utopian environment, everybody's having that career conversation. Every leader's having that career conversation with every middle manager throughout the entire organization, and it's all butterflies and rainbows. And then all of a sudden, oh my gosh, this crazy deadline comes up, and oh my gosh, fire alarm, everybody get the fire hose out. We gotta do this, we gotta do that. Everyone becomes a tactician and it becomes crazy. And then all of a sudden it's like, we haven't had this career conversation in 5 years. It's like, has it really been that long? I think that's where most companies drop the ball, because we don't set enough incentives at the top to have those career conversations with our people. Because I think, like we had all said, in an ideal world, we have these regular career conversations with all of our people. We get an idea of what they want. We get an idea of where they want to go. We have an idea of where the openings might be moving down the line. But then the work gets in the way. And if we don't have companies resilient, strong, and essentially, I guess, have the incentives in place that are strong enough to say, hey, I need you to stop what you're doing on whatever tactical activity you're doing right now. And you need to pause. You need to meet with all of your people, and you need to have that career conversation. Because if we don't, that's when that tends to fall behind the wayside. And then all of a sudden we have no idea what's going on, and succession planning becomes a surprise, and people leave and we don't know why, and all that sort of stuff. So how can we as leaders, as executives, set the right incentives in place so then our middle managers throughout the organization can abide by these kind of aspirational goals of succession planning?
Maybe I'll start there. I've seen it done well when the tools are in place, like incentives. I have never had any kind of incentives, maybe more of a stick. It's like, this had to be done. But what I found was in whether I was running an IT team, content management, or running sales, you had certain people who were always outspoken about their career aspirations, and you had others that maybe were less so. So I think it's important as a leader, the incentive there is, are you getting the most out of everybody? And maybe you're assuming somebody may want to go do something, but they don't. Or worse yet, the opposite. They may have aspirations that you haven't, talked with them about. So to me, I've seen employees who you have to ask them 25 times to fill out maybe their career template or their leadership aspirations, what they want to do. I've seen companies be very laissez-faire about it, where it's like, hey, you own your career, and kind of, hey, if you come with stuff, then I'll help you. All the way over to the other side, where it initially started, I'd say in the mid 90s, is a 1 year event, a once a year event at the end of the year, probably part of your 10% turnover of the company, calibration, who's cutting it, who isn't. The incentive was you had to be prepared to sit in front of your peers, in front of your leadership team, and talk about your team, understand them at a level beyond just they're a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and be prepared potentially to defend as they went to a departmental or higher integrated calibration, who goes where. And I've seen some pretty intense discussion and dialogue of the merits and benefits, to me, ultimately yielding a better organization. And if you were prepared, I can guarantee the next time you were. But that went to a biannual where you were talking with that. And I, certainly we all dreaded it. Everybody thought it was a time suck, whatever, but I think you walked out of it feeling far better than, going into it, feeling a lot more prepared. Because ultimately, in my experience leading teams, I was mostly surprised when people left, and it created a hole. And oftentimes in companies that do it poorly, you're going external to fill that hole, which, I think is a mistake.
I'm going to say it a little bit different versus incentive. I'm going to say, how can you operationalize the process into your management structure where it just becomes a part of how your leaders think, how they operate, how they function. Again, I've seen organizations where it wasn't part of that, and they really struggled with just having one-on-ones on a weekly or bi-weekly basis and moving into how can we operationalize conversations, performance conversations, development conversations into some type of cycle or something that was simple, easy to manage. To Kevin's point, maybe it's a simple tool, but that gives leaders the ability to do it in a way that's easy, that's at their fingertips. But again, it's how do you operationalize that into your leadership's mindset so that they understand how to do it, when to do it, the benefit of doing it. I think it goes back to the first conversation that we had about just basic succession, is making it a thread of the DNA into even your onboarding of new leaders, even your onboarding of individuals, teammates who have become leaders in your company. So to me, it's less about incentive, but more about the operationalizing how we think about it and deliver to it.
Well, and I agree with that, but let me just take a step back. So I have a couple things I want to mention here. So going back to incentives, I do think that there is a way, and maybe incentives is or is not the right word, but for me, recognition is an incentive. And I think as you are developing your team and developing that succession plan, as you identify people that could be leaders and could take over or step into your role, I think putting them forward, giving them that voice and recognizing them for that voice, and not just recognizing them, me recognizing my employee, but it's a company-wide recognition. I think that is a form of incentive. Mm-hmm. And I think also, while, there's large companies and small companies, and not all companies may have the HR tools that may be accessible to them. But for me, I'm, luckily enough, my company does have that. I also utilize some other tools that Garrett knows of from AIM. But as part of that, I'm constantly, I am in there working and documenting, especially when there have been either my employees have completed certain goals, or when I have my one-on-one conversations with them, or when they've done something, above and beyond. Or just when I want to recognize them for a certain project or task that they completed, I'm in there doing that, and that has encouraged my employees to also go in there and do that. And I think if your company doesn't have those tools, or it would be nice, but my company doesn't really follow that, be the example. Even if your leader isn't doing it, be the example of that. And I think that that's something that's really important for everybody to keep in mind.
You know what I love about that? Not just the recognition, like, hey, you did a great job, which I think is important. And we here do have a couple of tools like that. But what I really love about that is even recognition of your employees in a way that's expanding their portfolio of skills, expanding their experiences, expanding like who they're working with to give them recognition throughout the organization. I think that piece of it, that's what excites me about, this whole conversation is really that recognition, or to Garrett's point, an incentive of how we actually recognize in those ways that it's expanding. I tell my team all the time, 2024 is about expanding our portfolio of skills and experiences for our job 5 years from now. Yep. And it's those that are performing at a high level that we talk one-on-one about, okay, what is next? Who are you going to work with now? So I love everything you said, Lily, and 100% agree with that. I think that's awesome.
I just want to clarify, because I think like all three of you have not necessarily liked the term incentive, but I'm a little more jaded about the workforce. Maybe that's just me. I don't know. But if we're looking at how people's bonus structures are structured or settled up, let's say if you lead a sales team, you're looking at like, did we hit quota regularly? If you're leading a talent and recruiting team, what was our time to fill position? If we're looking at an operational team, what was our time for our team to operationally do XYZ activity, whatever it may be, whatever metric you're being measured against, I believe having those career conversations should also be a part of that. Like, how regularly do we have these career conversations? Because if that's not part of it, I think for those that are proactive and actively engaged and excited about doing those things, they will take the step towards it. But to Lily's point, you were saying, hey, you should just go out and do it. But when you're talking about a company of 1,000 or plus people, not everyone's going to be the you should just go out and just do it type of person. They're going to be the I'm going to do exactly what you're paying me to do person, and that's it. And so if we don't have, whether we call it incentives, we don't have compensation structures around proactively doing the activities we want to see them do from a succession planning standpoint, I unfortunately am not so confident that everyone's going to be doing it just because you should do it.
I haven't seen that. I haven't seen comp tied to performance conversations. I have seen it not in an organization that I work with, but at a conference I went to a couple of years ago on D&I, where there were some firms that they're at the VP level, their comp was tied to different components of D&I performance, and there was one other thing. But I think that, I don't know, Lily, Kevin, I'll lean into to you guys. I think that's not the norm. It's not market based. Not saying that it shouldn't be, but I have not seen that with all the companies I've worked with or come in contact with or talked with.
Maybe I need to go work for a company of. But they are tied. Our bonus structures are tied to our performance. Our annual.
Not performance. Ours is tied to performance. But ours aren't tied to us having performance conversations.
That's right. That's exactly
right. I haven't done that either.
Yeah, ours are tied to performance. My bonus is tied directly to my performance. Yeah. Not to my having conversations with my directs or my directs having conversations with their directs.
I think that makes sense, but also, I guess for me, and again, Garrett, I know you've heard me say this before, that my performance conversations are part of every single one-on-one that I have, or every single one-on-one I have. I am going through their list of goals. Where are we at with this? Have you accomplished, let's see, you have one more quarter to complete this goal. Where are we at with that? Which are tied to our bonus structures. Our goals are tied to our bonus structure. So that's part of every conversation that I have, but they're not necessarily, my conversations aren't necessarily tied to.
I'm thinking about it from a scale perspective, because the reason why we're having this conversation in the first place is because too often succession planning is a surprise and people are thrust in the position and they don't want to be into that position, or it's like, oh my gosh. Or the other way around, where, you know, we've got a backlog, maybe this department isn't growing as strong. You got someone who's been there for forever. They're like, hey, I'm not necessarily trying to move up in the organization. And so everybody below them is just kind of capped by the ceiling of this one person who's like, I'm going to write off over the next 7 years into my retirement and then kind of go from there. And someone who's below them is like, okay, well, I guess I'm waiting 7 years to assume this position and maybe further, but I'm ceilinged by that person.
So I don't know about incentives per se. I do like recognition, the way Lily stated that. I do think that, back to what Laura said, operationalizing a process so that everybody understands what's expected and what they need to do. But what I've seen in large companies is the talent flows to the leader that takes care of its people, that has high retention, has great ratings in the employee surveys, annual surveys that some companies will do biannually. So I think, you know, the winners, it's what's in it for me as a leader. If I'm taking care of the team and I have solid retention, good management scores, people are going to want to go, hey, I'm going to find a way, even if it's a stretching outside of my domain, I'm going to go work for Kevin, or I'm going to go work for Laura. Whereas those that kind of are rubber stamping it, maybe have higher turnover levels, constantly going to the outside, you're not going to see, people just don't want to go work there, or they're trying to find a way out.
Kevin, I think you're absolutely right. But the issue with that is that the issue is that there's a major delineation between who are the managers and leaders that are doing this and who are the managers and leaders that are not doing this. And I think from an executive standpoint, our goal should be, how can we have some form of semblance of like regularity between all of our leaders, so then everyone feels empowered and they can work within the department they want to work with. And it's almost a given that the leader of that department is going to be a really great leader and empower their people. Like, do you feel like those leadership skills and traits are something the one develops over time? Do you think some people have it and other people don't have it, in terms of the proactively, I guess, empowering their people, taking care of their teams, having the career conversations? Like, how do you feel like that skill is developed? And have you seen a company do a good job of teaching that to their leaders?
I have, yeah. And I do, to answer your question, I have seen certain people just have the innate leadership, maybe they're better speakers, they have presence. But I do think it can be taught. Like, I also think there are folks or people who have blind spots that, through structured programs, when you have been identified maybe as key talent that's going to move up, I have seen programs where they send those key talent out away for a week. They are given problems to go solve. They mix their teams up. You learn an incredible amount of things. I've seen it in companies where you understand that you may be highlighted for the next level. They do have some of those leadership development programs, but they're very, I'd say maybe even in a 30 or 40,000 person company, they're limited to maybe 20 people a year. To me, that's too small. I understand it's an investment, but I can, the companies we'll talk about, I've seen some who have grown leaders over 20, 30 years. And I've seen other companies that are constantly going to the outside, that basically every leadership role at maybe outside of 5% is hired from the outside. And that is someone trying to grow your career is demoralizing. I've been at those type of companies. I've had employees asking for leadership development programs. I think Garrett's maybe talked to one or two in the past. He probably knows who I'm talking about, but that's where, it becomes like, well, we can't fund that for that person. I'm like, that person's going to be a leader for the next 20 years. It meets all the objectives or goals of the company. And, you have to essentially, as a P&L owner, maybe go and do it on your own, which
that's,
you've done.
And Kevin, that's something that I think I struggle with. Like, I personally have taken on, gone and sought out some opportunities for myself of how I can grow and learn. But I think getting the leadership team to invest in in the people in terms of growing their skill sets and their management, growing their management style and their skill sets. I think that's one thing that maybe I've struggled with. I don't know if Laura, you being in HR, if you have any suggestions to that, or Garrett. Sorry to put you on the spot.
Great. Laura, jump in.
No, I totally agree. I think I've seen that from every perspective. That's something we're talking about now. To Kevin's point, these large companies, and you're wanting to develop this pool of leaders, but you only can invest in 20. So what do you do? How do you make that available to your high highs and your highs that are in that growth trajectory? I know companies are doing all sorts of leadership development, internal development, they're outsourcing development. I have seen that very same thing. I mean, we're having those conversations as well. So
I think you're kind of alluding to another point, Kevin, that we're about to jump into. But nothing feels better than the slap in the face of being at a company for a long time, thinking you're ready for the next position, and the company say, there's just something about you that I don't feel ready for yet. We're gonna hire from the outside someone we've never worked with or known before because we think they could be better than you, someone we already know who's at the company. Nothing feels better than that all slap in the face. But it's really detrimental to culture, and I'm being facetious and joking. But Kevin, you bring up that point, and I would love to ask, Laura, Kevin, Lily, what have you found what are mistakes that you've seen companies make when it comes to succession planning? And are there are there remedies that you've seen that, if they make a little change, that can have a really big impact on companies' abilities to effectively succession plan moving forward? Like, what are the mistakes that you see and you're like, gosh, if you instead of it doing it like this, instead you did it like that, you might have a really big impact on the organization. I think so often, and the reason why I ask that is because I think we can look at these small changes like a mini domino that has a huge effect on the organization overall. It becomes less daunting to observe the change over time. Whereas if you're like, hey, we're totally rehauling how everything operates here, it feels very daunting and like, oh my gosh, we couldn't possibly change. But if we can, I don't know, is there a bite-sized thing, a nugget, or just something small that you think, gosh, if companies who have historically done it bad could just do it a little bit differently, it could have a really big impact on the culture moving forward. Is any, I love to learn.
We were talking about this today actually, and I've seen a couple of things. I'm gonna hone it down to two things. One is, again, going back to having the goals. What are the goals for it? And then coming out of that with actionable plans. What are the actionable plans that we're coming out with? And those are usually going to be development plans, but then being able to support those development plans. We were talking today about, we've seen these large companies, their development pathways are maybe international leadership rotations. So, you have a development plan, you are put in this other role, you're there for 2 years, but you might not be getting support for that role. So it's just like, hey, good luck. Instead of having a development plan for that role and a support mechanism, you're putting somebody in a position where they're not going to succeed. Or putting somebody in a role for, okay, you're going to be here for 2 years, but where am I going after? Not having that pull through plan and that pull through support with that succession plan. I think companies get to that first layer of, here are development plans and here's what we're going to do, but they don't go to the second step, third step. They're not planning for 3 to 5 years. And so it's almost the stalemate of, wow, we put this person over here, we didn't support them, they're not doing well, now what? Or we put this person over here and their time is up, now what? So those are the things that I've seen over time, whether it's to Kevin's point, a company of 30,000 or a company of 5,000. Just not having those actionable future plans and pulling them through.
And Laura, I want to add one thing to that because I think you bring up such a good point there. But to like, if I can operationally or just like tangibly think about it playing out in a real world environment, I think one of the biggest disservices a leader can do for and bringing up a new leader into a role is saying this one thing. And I've heard leaders say this many times. It's, hey, I'm bringing you into this position, but like I don't want you to come to me with like your questions. I just kind of need you to answer it for
Like,
yourself and figure
figure
it
it
out.
out.
Yeah, that
I
is
know.
something
Oh,
leaders
man.
do constantly because they think they're busy and they're like, I don't want to touch it. And then that leader's like, cool, like, do I never go to you with any
There should be a
questions?
support mechanism there, especially, new leaders, whether it's a new leader that's been here or a new leader, to your point, coming into the company. There should be an entire onboarding support mechanism to hire for success. And I think that is just a huge misnomer. Every company I've seen across, whether I've worked there, they were my customer. That was a big. There is one large oil and gas company. They had succession planning of rotationals, international rotations. If they had it planned, I want to say 3 to 6 years out. So Garrett, you're going to this role in wherever. You will plan on moving from there to this other, and then your third rotation will be back here. So you knew over the next 6 years where you were going and what your role was. One company of my, Kevin, 30 years in the business, I've seen that truly has a plan.
Yeah, so I love that. Mentors, I actually wrote that down. I think that's the key, and I've seen that be the big mistake, followed by the even bigger mistake of somebody who I would have thought and have seen had a phenomenal career ahead of them, maybe got pushed into a role a little bit too far, but you could argue you could develop into that with the right coaching, mentorship, and for one reason or another, maybe a missed year, the person was released. And I'm like, okay, how does somebody go from the 20 development program to being let go and they still were had the all the traits that you would want long term in the company? And I think that's where maybe performance minded, particularly as you get into sales, the sales side of the house, the turnover, if you miss your sales numbers, that's kind of the end of things in many cases.
So Kevin, on that point, this makes me think, how in that scenario you were describing, if you got someone who's in the top 20, really active leader, really good, we put them in a role, 1 year later, we're letting them go. Is that a product of a company not being comfortable with a demotion or like having an audit of like, oh my gosh, where did we miss the boat here? You were one of the best emerging leaders in our organization. You crushed it in this position. We put you in this position. You weren't able to be successful. Is it because this role is inherently unsuccessful and anybody we put in this role is unsuccessful? Or is it maybe that you were really great in this one position and we don't know how to have a conversation about bringing you back into this one role that you were fantastic in?
I think in that particular instance, I was thinking about they potentially had the opportunity to rotate back into something. So it was a mutual decision, which, having had that issue myself, you say earlier in my career when I had a big role through the financial crisis in 2008 or nine, there was, changes going on, shrinking from the executive level. I did have an opportunity to move down, and I kind of hindsight, like you never know. Gosh, what if I stayed? I chose to move on. It certainly, you move on and do other things. But where I go back to if I had a solid mentor, if the other person had a solid mentor, they felt like somebody had their back, because I have seen other people move from big roles and maybe that wasn't what they wanted, or the stress associated with that. It was almost relieving to move back into a role that was maybe a level or two down. Laura and Lily, you guys there's obviously generational differences. I'm of that, 30 plus years working. I've seen a lot. I've received a lot, and probably, one reason or another kind of been, the person giving the poor decision for something or another. But Laura, I mean, are you seeing differences? Is it, with the newer generations coming out, are they going to just move even if you invest?
And it move position wise, location
or
wise.
leave the company, though to me the
Yeah.
loyalty seems a lot less.
That's a really interesting question because we had gone into over the last several years, I would say over the last 6 to 8 years, maybe even 8 to 10, we thought early career is going to leave their first job. They're going to stay somewhere between 1 to 3 years and then they're going to leave. I'm seeing a little bit of the opposite where early career is wanting to stay and grow and develop and shift into new and different things. Garrett, we've had that very similar situation, moving somebody into a role maybe a little too early. And in one instance, it was wrong job, right person. The other was we weren't calibrating to support that person into what was needed. So I've seen both, but it's really interesting right now because we're seeing the earlier career actually staying longer than what I think we saw 6 and 8 years ago.
For the wrong job, right person situation, how did you go about reeling them in? I think like so often our egos become so tied to, oh, our LinkedIn profile is updated with our new title, and we really like this new compensation range that we're at now.
Yeah.
Everyone's congratulated us, and now
Yeah.
my identity is part of this new role. And then it's like, even if I don't like the role itself, how do I go about saving face to my peers, my family, my
Yeah. I
friends?
think
Yeah.
in this one situation, we were very lucky because the teammate themselves identified wrong job and was able to work through with the current manager, with our team, with the HR team on, okay, what is my options here, right? And so we all band together and said, okay, here are our options. So I think we were very lucky that the teammate was self-aware that this is not the right job for me, and we were able to find a new role, and of course the person had to interview for it and everything, but it was a success story. We've had the opposite.
Yeah.
Right.
The opposite where people are
Not
struggling
self-aware.
and they think they're amazing, and you're like,
Yeah.
they're like, what?
Yep.
Like it's like so yeah.
I'll go. Oh, I mean, I was going to go back to what Lily said, and to be honest, I didn't to the extent she does in all the one-on-one do career every time. It was at least maybe once a quarter. But I think if you have the tough conversations to help with self-awareness, it takes managerial courage to have those. And if you're training your managers and not just couching, but really having those heart-to-heart conversations, and you come from a place of trust, which to me sounds like Lily comes from, developing that and making sure you make those one-on-ones and you have those conversations. And sometimes a one-on-one is there's something going on in their life, and that's what you're talking about, and supporting them that way. But it's again back to what you said, Laura, operationalizing that. One-on-ones to me are a core element of succession planning, so that when you come down to having the career discussion, which should be had more frequently than once a year, or once every, as Garrett said, once every 3 years.
Nothing should be a surprise.
Yeah, and then even having that training, and I think some companies are good at that. They've got it on there. You can listen before you get into the conversations. I would think now with AI, ChatGPT, helping people write effective, one-on-one feedback conversations or career documents. I do know a lot of managers are using those tools anyway. So if HR could get ahead of that and maybe incorporate that into, what I would call their own database or their own language model that then funnels into that. But again, it's money, it's operationalizing it, and making it part of the process in DNA.
I'm gonna have to find a sentence to say with the word couching in it because I love it.
Lily, what mistakes have you seen companies make in succession planning, and what would be like one thing if they could do a little differently could have a huge impact on their culture over time?
I can boil it down to a few words. Listen to the employees. Even at the executive leadership team, a lot of times I see the succession planning done within that team to then trickle down, and they're not listening to the employees. They're not listening to their leaders within the organization that they put in roles because they believe in their skill sets, but listen to the employees. And I think what Kevin said, I am such a huge advocate of mentorship. I mean, it's a form of investing in the employees. I think that is so huge for really anybody to be successful within a company, especially if those that are coming on new, is to have that mentorship. And I think leaders can lead with a sense of mentorship as well. But I think above all else, just listen to the employees.
That's a really, the listen to the employees, I think makes a ton of sense. I guess, is there a special way when I say listen to employees that you subscribe? And the reason why I ask that, it's like if you were to ask Henry Ford in the late 1900s, what his customers, if he were to listen to his customers and ask him, what do my customers want? They would say a faster horse. Like they couldn't fathom what a car could be. Is there ever a scenario where when you say, hey, listen to my employees, and the employees say, I'm facing this challenge, I need this. Can the executive team be able to say like, hey, maybe you don't actually need this, but like the problem is
Yeah,
this. Let's focus on the problem.
absolutely. But it's
and come
not
up.
absolutely, but they're hearing what the employee needs.
Yeah.
They're
Okay.
listening to it. And I think that part's very important. And especially when you're talking about a succession plan. I mean, I could say, Kevin, here's what I think your succession plan should be. And it's nothing of what you want. It's not based on your experience or your experience with the organization. It's, may not be a good fit for you. And if I'm not listening to you, then I'm not being a good leader. First of all, I'm certainly not going to build a good succession plan. So
Yeah, you have to fold in to your point, Lily, the teammate, the employees' aspirations.
absolutely.
And how do you build this around business goals, business need, but the aspirations of that individual, so that you're building a plan of development and growth. I'm always talking about, where do you want to be in 3 to 5 years? What are the experiences we need to get into your portfolio to get you there? And
exactly, but it comes down to listening to them.
Yeah, right.
And I think that's something we can all agree on, because even in Kevin's point about like, nothing is more deflating than hiring from the outside. Hiring from the outside is evidence of the company not listening to their employees. If some are aspirational and want to get to that next level, and not putting them in positions to take on those additional responsibilities to see how they perform. Or if they do, not having a hard conversation around, hey, here's where we might have not hit the ball. This is what we need to do to like make sure we hit the ball. So then when this position opens up, you're ready to assume that position. But I think also it's really hard for companies to think that many steps ahead. I think a lot of companies, they don't think this person's going to leave this position. And then when that person leaves that position, it's like, oh my gosh, I've now had to, take this person over here, have them lead this whole other department too temporarily on an interim basis. I need to bring in someone to just take over this department. And do I promote from within? But that means I've got less, then I got to replace that person who will be promoted from within to this new role for that role. So I don't know. It creates convolution, and it seems like the easy way out just to hire from the outside. But if we can listen to our people and give them tasks where they can actually develop their skills and abilities, it sounds like that can be a huge, I guess, preparer for whatever is going to come. Preemptively, even if the role doesn't exist yet.
Agreed.
Cool. Well, Laura, Kevin, Lily, this has been a fantastic pre-symposium panel. I'd love to close off. Are there any final points that you'd like to share with our audience around how to effectively succession plan and or promote from within, or just things that businesses should be thinking about when it comes to these next steps?
I would say maybe measure it and start now, even if it's simple, document it and get the ball rolling, because I mean, as Laura knows, just in talent acquisition, number one, it's really difficult to find good talent. Number two, even the people you hire from the outside, it's hard to judge how they're gonna succeed in your culture. And to me, maybe the devil or more often the devil is better than kind of going outside. My opinion, but
I like
Kevin and
start
I,
now.
we're a lot of like. Yeah, I mean, I agree, and I think I like that Kevin said start now. I mean, you may not know everything right now, but just if you start now, learn as you go. I mean, that at least you're going somewhere.
Agree. Start now and make it simple. You can scale over time.
Is a great way of looking at it. I think that's great. So business owners out there, if you're not doing this currently, start now. You might think you're too busy or you got this new deadline, you got this business that you need to focus on. Start now. Make the time, find the time. It will be well worth it because gosh, you're going to be a whole lot busier if your senior leader or person that's on your team leaves your company, you don't have a backup plan for who's going to replace them. Well, everybody, thanks for being here. Great pre-symposium panel today. For those of you who are watching, if you want to meet these three incredible individuals, come to our executive symposium next week, April 25th in Houston, Texas, 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. We are going to discuss how to effectively succession plan and promote from within. Thanks for your time, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your day.